Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and as many of your broadband services are perhaps not as good as others, and as some of your keyboard skills perhaps are a little better than others as well, we're going to wait a minute or two more so that everyone can log on. My name is Vincent Wall, and you're very welcome to this seminar. We have 300 people registered for the seminar today, so for the webinar today, so that's fantastic engagement, fantastic response, thank you, and evidence, I suppose, of the huge interest in the theme that we're going to discuss. Joining us today, we have senior management, teaching staff, researchers and students from the 7 IUA member universities, as well as RCSI, TU Dublin, Dublin Business School, and IOTs in Limerick, Cork, Sligo and Waterford. So a huge range of participants today, which is fantastic. We're also pleased to welcome representatives from industry, including IBEC and American Chamber, and from the public sector, such as SFI and HEA. And a number of overseas delegates from the likes of Saudi Arabia, Canada, Portugal, France, and China. So to use a little of our own Irish language, Tá fáilte roimh go léir. You're all very welcome, and thanks indeed for tuning in to us. Now that hopefully you're all logged in, on behalf of IUA, I'd like to formally welcome you to the second of 3 seminars in our Future of Ireland Autumn Series. The theme today is the pivotal role of universities for future skills and innovation, where, amongst other issues, we'll be discussing the role of a top-quality higher education system in producing a supply of work-ready graduates and in leading our research and innovation network as a core element of Ireland's attractiveness as an FDI destination of choice. By our guest speakers, Simon Harris, TD, Minister for Further and Higher Education, Research, Science and Innovation, and as you said yourself, Minister, I heard you say it really zings off there, that title. And Mike Beary, Country Manager of Amazon Web Services Ireland. And by our panellists, Professor Kirsten May, Interim President, University of Limerick, Claire McGee, Head of Education and Innovation Policy in IBEC, and by Kevin McStravick, Academic Affairs, Union of Students in Ireland. You're all very welcome. And you out there can send us questions for our speakers and panellists by using the Q&A function on your screens, and we'll try to get to as many of those questions as possible to get them to our panelists and speakers before our scheduled finishing time of 2 p.m. Now, just before we begin proceedings, I'll ask our panelists to turn off their video and to mute themselves before rejoining us for our panel discussion. So please turn off your video and audio if you would. Just before we call on our speakers, I have great pleasure in inviting Dr. Paddy Prendergast, Provost of Trinity College Dublin and Chair of the IUA, to formally introduce today's proceedings. Paddy.
Minister, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure as Chair of the IUA to welcome you all to this webinar, which emphasises the pivotal role of universities for future skills and innovation. Excuse me. I'm glad that we no longer have to make the argument for higher education's vital importance to this country's future. It's accepted by all sectors, government, industry and civil society. And it was explicitly acknowledged by this government when they appointed Ireland's first ever government minister for further and higher education, research, innovation and science. We'll hear shortly from Minister Harris himself, and we're delighted that he's participating. There is, of course, an enormous amount to be said on the pivotal role of universities. It's a very large topic indeed. I look forward to today's full and frank discussions and the many vital issues being aired. I'd like to confine my opening remarks to just 2 very brief comments. First, at the risk of repeating the IUA's eternal call, but it has to be repeated until it's answered. We cannot bring excellence into our higher education system unless we grasp the nettle of funding. Funding should incentivise excellence and promote student experience and research as the main driver of the innovation economy. Our research system remains critically underfunded compared to other countries. This means that our competitiveness is suffering. The Castles report explores a number of funding options, and it's up to the government to commit to an option and implement it. Otherwise, to use the familiar metaphor, all our efforts are just moving around the deck chairs on the Titanic. I note that this webinar is firmly focused on skills and innovation, with a particular emphasis on ICT, digital and business skills. As chair of the IUA, I'd like to make the point, which I think is implicit but should need to be underlined, that the pivotal role of a globally competitive research universities, their role is central in meeting future skills and innovation needs. Just 2 days ago, we launched in Trinity the Trinity Education Project, which is a comprehensive renewal of our undergraduate curriculum, which has been 7 years in the making. At the launch, I made the point, first, that it's our duty to educate students to be flexible, adaptive, and prepared for continuous professional development. And that's about mindset rather than specific skill sets. Secondly, I noted that when we talk about a compelling future, the economy is just one facet. A thriving economy is dependent on a compelling political, environmental, social, and cultural fabric. It makes no sense to talk about economic growth, for example, that's not also environmentally responsible. And if we don't protect human rights and individual freedoms, and we don't have a thriving artistic sector, then we stifle the very creativity and independence of thought that makes discoveries and drives innovation. In short, I accepted that Ireland needs more STEM graduates, and in Trinity we're meeting that through our new Engineering, Environment and Emerging Technologies Institute. But we do need our students and the country. We will be doing both a disservice if, as well as imparting specific skills, we don't help them develop an independent, creative, adaptive mindset and a wider understanding of their responsibilities towards safeguarding civic society and addressing global challenges. Our graduates need the right skills and the right mindset. Let's put a continuous focus on developing both. I wish everyone a stimulating webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Provost, for those remarks. I'd now like to introduce our first guest speaker today, Simon Harris, Minister for Further and Higher Education, Research, Science and Innovation. Simon was appointed to this role in June 2020, having served as Minister for Health over the previous 4 years. Simon will oversee and guide the work of the new department responsible for policy, funding and governance of the higher and further education and research sectors. In the short term, this involves, I suppose, the steady guidance of the sector through these unprecedented times and challenges. But his focus and that of his department is also very much on the future of the sector and in ensuring its continued success and sustainability for future generations of students. Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Vincent, and good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for giving of your time this afternoon to engage in this webinar. I'm really grateful to have an opportunity to be with you today. And I'd like to thank the Provost of Trinity, Dr. Paddy Prendergast, and his colleagues in the Irish University Association for hosting the event, and to Mike Beary and all of our panelists for joining us here today for what I do hope will be an important and stimulating conversation. Our theme for today, the pivotal role of universities for future skills and innovation, could not be more timely, nor could it be more important to me. It in many ways captures the mandate of my new department, and your overall theme captures its manifesto, the future of Ireland. I don't wish to be accused of sucking up to the boss, but I do see this speech that I'm delivering at this IUA event as very much a sequel to the speech delivered to the IUA by the now Taoiseach Micheál Martin in his address to you just over a year ago. I believe it was an excellent speech. I believe it was a visionary speech, but there are surely few that have become a reality so shortly after. On that day, the Taoiseach urged a new agenda for higher education, based on a renewed focus on research and innovation, on strategic consideration for the role of higher education, and an enhanced policy direction for the sector at large. That event developed the concept of creating a separate department, no longer a poor relation, no longer a subset of another department, but a separate department of further and higher education, research, innovation and science. And today I'm honoured to lead that department. 12 months from concept to the delivery of the department with the longest title in government, 10 words, quite a mouthful, not very catchy, And sometimes when I try to break it down in its simplest sense, I very much see myself as the Minister for Talent, the Minister for Skills, and the Minister for the Future. We live in a country of just under 5 million people in a world of 7.8 billion people. We represent just over 0.06% of the world's population. So we shouldn't kid ourselves that the world owes us a living. How we develop the talent of our people will determine if we can punch above our numbers and if we can prosper at home and internationally. The exciting thing as a minister, as a new department, and as higher education institutions is the privileged position that we have been given to shape that future for our country. The establishment of the department is the first step on what I see as our collective journey to set a new agenda for further and higher education, one that considers it a vital national resource, both socially and economically. Historically, this country has put its faith in the principle that investing in our people would unlock social and economic progress. That principle is now enshrined in our new department, a lodestar, if you will, as we chart a new course in a new context. The need to consider the changing context internationally, economically, technologically, and societally was well set out by the Taoiseach last year, but it has truly changed utterly since then. This has been a year like no other. It has tested all of us in very different ways, and no one is unaffected. But there is no doubt that some people are more affected. The stark spotlight COVID-19 has shone on disadvantage and inequality in our focus, especially all of us here today. So I don't think we should limit our conversation to one of reopening our country in time, but one of rebuilding and reshaping. The higher education sector has also been tested, and it has not been found wanting. Not only were you able to maintain teaching and learning in radically challenging circumstances, but you also determined the flexibility to meet urgent needs, including the additional university places required. I want to sincerely thank you for your leadership and for your continued close engagement with my department on priorities, most recently in implementing the package of student assistance announced in the budget, and which I know the IUA welcomed. I commend your achievements in a time of crisis for our country. However, even if the horrific COVID-19 crisis is one no one ever would have wished for, it is not one we can waste. The dynamism demonstrated by our higher education system is a lesson we must not unlearn. Our society and the world of work are clearly changing and changing rapidly. And if anything, this is going to be accelerated further by this pandemic. Universities will have an important role in equipping us to manage this change. This will entail agility and innovation in how universities operate. I see this in your recent work on micro-credentials and the delivery of certified qualifications in short courses in flexible formats. This is exactly the kind of initiative we need to increase Irish university capacity to extract and adapt high-demand modules from existing programs and to develop tailored courses to suit the needs of enterprise, of citizens, and of the concept of lifelong learning. For me, the overall lesson of the pandemic is that our ambition must go far beyond our country going back to normal, but rather that we seize this opportunity to transform it. And I really do hope this can be our mutual mission. I'm not going to recap our key initiatives so far in the July stimulus and elsewhere, as I know this audience has been closely engaged in them or will have been following them avidly. But I do hope they are a strong signal of intent and our fundamental commitment to future skills and innovation. I and my department are determined to be the driver of a vibrant sector which produces individuals who are equipped with the skills that they need to progress in the way that they want to, and in a way that meets the needs of an evolving economy and contributes to an inclusive society. The higher and further education sectors are critical sources of knowledge creation, innovation, skills, and human capital development. There is an opportunity to deepen collaboration between the two sectors so that they work hand in glove with one another, but also that they work with industry and enterprise sectors, and this is key. Through the new department, we have the structures to bring about a transformation to Ireland's response to evidence-informed skills forecasting and to truly inclusive policy development. A key contribution will be a strategic policy framework, which builds a national consensus on outcomes and provides a framework within which a range of different institutions play a complementary role in providing educational opportunities and the different types and levels of qualifications which we need now and for the future. Developing an appropriate funding model to underpin this framework will be a prerequisite. I'm very clear on that. Detailed research is underway to inform the decisions required on this funding model next year. So the era of political cowardice in relation to the funding of this sector must end. I am not naive enough to believe that research and evidence will be sufficient to generate the right outcome, one that will serve our long-term interests. More than ever, there are urgent and mounting demands on the finite resources available to individuals and to government. But as well as urgent demands, there are strategically important, the areas where investment will set us on a sustainable course, which in time will be seen as decisive in our success as a people. So this must be seen as an investment in our country. And that success can never be measured solely in economic terms. The university of the 21st century cannot just be an engine for economic growth. It must be a beacon of inclusion. We know now lifelong learning is essential for all in an increasingly digital and automated world, and that it must embrace all the different lives we lead. Whether you have a physical or an intellectual disability, third level education is for you and can very much be a part of your journey through life. Whether you have challenges with literacy, numeracy, or digital skills, third level education is for you and can unlock opportunities you and your family must not be denied. Whether you did not complete second level education or have suffered from poverty and disadvantage, third level education is for you and can enable equality. If future skills and innovation are the key to our economic success, the role of universities in unlocking their full potential must be to ensure that no one is left behind. The era of cultural snobbery and one thing being for your own child and something else being for someone else's child must end. The Taoiseach warned last year of the need to avoid the social exclusion that can come with knowledge economies. And I want that warning to always ring loudly in our ears. I want to see our universities take a leadership role on tackling the societal ills of inequality, of sexual harassment, and of violence. I will do all that I can to promote female leadership in academia and to promote the policy direction to embed the principles of consent. But I need you to rise to this challenge, and I know that you will. I plan to introduce legislation next year to overhaul the governance of the higher education sector. With the setting up of the new department, we're taking the opportunity to review the existing policy proposals. It will be important to achieve clarity and complementarity of roles between the department and its agencies, particularly the Higher Education Authority and the Quality and Qualifications in Ireland. I also think it's opportune to review the legislative provisions relating to the governance of our higher education institutions. I'm aware that the sector has prioritised work on governance in recent years, including in enhancing the role and leadership of governing authorities, and I welcome that. The agility and flexibility of universities are key strengths, and this absolutely requires an appropriate level of autonomy. But hand in hand with such autonomy must come strong governance and accountability mechanisms at an institutional level. Research and innovation is a very important component of my ministerial responsibilities and is not just an add-on, it's an interlinked vital component. We have a unique opportunity to ensure that research is no longer in silos in our country and to give it much greater coherence on the national and international stage. The establishment of my department will now mean that for the first time in the history of our state, well over 50% of national public research funding will be under the auspices of one department. This is a great opportunity to bring further cohesion and investment to research and innovation strategy and funding. We need a balanced portfolio of research, from early stage researchers to the globally renowned, embracing all disciplines and increasingly important at the interface between disciplines, from investigator-generated research topics to mission-driven investment in areas of strategic national importance, based upon deep partnerships with enterprise, including and contributing to vibrant innovation systems at regionally and nationally levels that embrace SMEs, and also contributing not just to the economy, but to public good and to answering some of the major societal challenges we face. Research and innovation will be fundamental to addressing our economic and social challenges such as climate change, digitalization, and public health like the pandemic we're living through now. People are alive to science and research. They're excited about it now. This is a once in a generation opportunity. People are talking about these areas. We now have a chance to find a vaccine or a treatment to a pandemic, to a virus that has crippled all our lives, in a way that brings science into the public eye, in a way that perhaps it hasn't been before. As Innovation 2020 comes to an end of its term, we can build upon its considerable success. We have further opportunity in the next phase to greatly strengthen our research ecosystem. Our research community must be interwoven with all of the other efforts and supported if we're to achieve the international standing that we seek as an innovation leader. I've talked about a number of individual components that make up our work program, and there are others I could expand upon and will do again in the future. But it's the relationship between these elements that I see as the greatest potential, the breaking down of silos and the knitting together of all these elements. So today I want to very clearly set out to you the 4 pillars upon which I will build this new department, the 4 pieces of the vision that we must create together. My vision is to see us become an innovation island, with my department providing direction on strategy, funding, and structural reform for the research and innovation ecosystem, and regional and national linkage with enterprise, in particular our SMEs. Secondly, an island of talent, unleashing the contribution of higher education and further education and training to human capital and lifelong learning. Thirdly, an international island. At a time when so many countries are beginning to look inward, we must bravely look outward with confidence, promoting Ireland as a leader in higher education and research. And fourthly, but absolutely as a priority, we must be an island of inclusion and engagement, driving equity of educational outcomes, social cohesion, and the contribution of our education and research institutions in tackling the great public policy and societal challenges of our day and of our generation. These are the 4 key strategic themes that we will be taking forward. They encompass the horizontal relationships that form the rationale for this new department. And our universities are at the intersection of innovation, talent, international, inclusion, and engagement. In relative terms, my department has a very large budget. This is the 5th biggest budget department in our country. But in staffing terms, as a new department, it's small, though growing. And I'm very fortunate with the caliber of our staff, their dedication and their passion, and I thank them for that. But as I take forward this strategic work with my department, I'd like to ask you not just for your support or tacit agreement, but that you would commit your resources, your intellectual capital on that and those of your institutions to work with us, to assist us, to work in collaboration and partnership. The creation of a single department encompassing further and higher education, research, innovation, and science has changed the policy landscape in Ireland. Universities, with their role in transitions from further education, with their development of talented and rounded individuals that contribute to the knowledge economy and an inclusive society, with their strong research base, with their reach into knowledge transfer and innovation, are uniquely placed to shape and benefit strongly from this new integrated policy approach. We have many initiatives in train across the remit of our department and many more to come, but I want the whole to be greater than the sum of the parts. We aim to drive not only Ireland's economic success, but also to advance social cohesion and inclusion. Every individual must have a path to the place and future that they want through the means that suits them best. This is our investment for our country's future. So in concluding, Yeats said, "Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire." I want you to know I'm fired up. I want you to know that this new department will be the ignition in the engine, driving the delivery of our joint ambitions for the future of our country and our world, but we can only do it together.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister, for those very stimulating remarks. And we know from your track record, wherever you've worked, how hard you will work, but we can hear the passion in your voice and in your delivery there for the work ahead by this unique new department. Our second speaker this afternoon is Mike Beary, who's Country Manager for Ireland and Director of HR EMEA for Amazon Web Services, or AWS. A native of Meath, God help us, Mike holds a Bachelor of Social Studies of Social Science from University College Dublin and a Master's in Social Work from the University of Pittsburgh. Mike was Global HR Director at the Amazon Marketplace Organization in Seattle until 2017, when he was honoured to return home to Ireland to take up his current leadership role in AWS. For 14 years, Amazon Web Services has been the world's most comprehensive and broadly adopted cloud platform. In recent years, major investments by AWS in data centers and in cloud-based services here have led to a doubling of employment by the company, especially in the engineering and research fields. Just this July, Amazon announced an additional 1,000 high-skilled jobs, which will bring the company's headcount to an amazing 5,000 employees here in Ireland. Mike is someone who will have a great perspective on what companies at the leading edge of technological development are looking for from our universities and their graduates. Mike, over to you.
Many thanks, Vincent. I'm honored to be part of this vital discussion today. I want to thank the President and CEO of IUA, Paddy Prendergast and Jim Miley, and for the whole IUA team for making today possible. And Minister, I really appreciate the ambition and the intentionality of your remarks, and I'm honored to share the platform with you. And I really love that potential of an integrated department focused on talent. And from your remarks, I especially like your concept of that innovation island with an emphasis on talent, inclusion, and engagement. So let me add a few thoughts to the discussion. So I came back to Ireland, as Vincent said, in 2017, after 25 years in the US, to lead the next wave of investment for the company here in Ireland. As part of my due diligence in assessing the potential for longer-term investment here, I met with several third-level institutions. Some of you might be in this virtual room with us today, to understand their approach to developing their graduates. I typically ask computer science programs, how do you assess your course content and curriculum so that you know that what you're teaching is keeping up with the evolution in technology? One institution explained that for every 4 years, the faculty sits down to review the course content, and then they invite in 1 or 2 external perspectives. They then publish any revisions so that students who apply are clear on what they'll learn over the 4 years of the program. A second institution explained that they tell their incoming students they don't know yet what the curriculum will cover in that 4th year. Why? Because technology is evolving so quickly, anything they would project 4 years out would be out of date by the time they reach their final year. So I share that story not to critique one approach over another, but to underscore the importance in understanding how rapidly technology is changing. And as it changes, it impacts on innovation, on commerce, and on day-to-day life. So that pace of change is quickening, and we have to help the students of today, the leaders of tomorrow, be prepared to manage it for the years ahead. So we know that data is growing exponentially. For example, in 2025, the world would generate 4 times more data that year than this year. So all that data is captured in the cloud. So I'm fortunate to be part of an organization that's at the front edge of the transition to the digital economy. Here at AWS, we power the cloud. So think of cloud computing as the on-demand IT resources with pay-as-you-go pricing. It's like flipping on the switch to turn on the lights in your house, and the power company instantly sends electricity. We run the technology in a secure setting, and you get instant access to all that computing power via the internet. So as all that data is generated, finding ways to develop usable insights from it is really vital. That's where machine learning and artificial intelligence comes in. We mortal humans can no longer keep pace with the information being generated. Anything that can be automated will be automated. So just think about your car. It's capturing hundreds of points of data every second it's on the road. Your location, your speed, energy use, wear and tear. You used to have to take it in for service every 12,000 miles, regardless of how quickly you did those miles or under what conditions. Now, you might get a text message from your car dealer, or maybe even from your car, saying that a specific part or system needs attending to. Or to give another great example from here in Ireland, stats.com down in Limerick has become a world leader in real-time sports analytics. Sports teams used to rely on their coaching staff to spot patterns and opportunities from the sidelines. but now using AWS technology, stats.com captures millions of points of data, every step a player takes, how far they kick or carry a ball, and what way the opposing players react to their moves. They turn that data into real-time analytics that adds to the enjoyment of the game for the fans and offers actionable insights for coaches and managers throughout the game. So if we can safely agree that the pace of technology innovation and data creation is increasing, then that means that even if we aim to keep up with the developments in technology and teach them at university, we'll still fail to prepare students for the future. And if ML and AI are now analyzing all that information, what's left for humans to do in the future? So I'll argue that the application of judgment to make high quality decisions is best held by people. I'll also argue that we need to switch from teaching content, the Pale, to assessing new information to make high quality decisions. In Ireland, as Vincent mentioned, we've doubled in size in my 4 years. We now have over 2,500 staff here. And even since the March lockdown, we've interviewed, made offers, and onboarded almost 500 new staff, most of whom we haven't even met in person yet. So we're fortunate that we have the capability to continue to grow and run our businesses here, and we're constantly impressed by the caliber of people who come to join us. The day, though, of this stereotype of a software engineer glued to a computer screen, coding away alone with headphones on, really isn't how great products and services are built anymore. Obviously, we assess candidates for their technical aptitude. Can they understand basic coding architecture? Can they spot a gap in programming logic? However, we put the greater emphasis on their ability to demonstrate a set of leadership traits. These traits, we call them leadership principles within the organization, underpin every business and every talent decision we make as a company every day. Some are obvious. We look for customer obsession, the ability to put yourself in the shoes of the customer and work backwards from what they expect of us. Others are self-evident. We look for the ability to think big, because without that, the alternative quickly becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But for me, as I think about the future, 3 of those leadership traits really stand out. 1 is earns trust. 2, are right a lot. And 3 is have what we call have backbone, disagree, and commit. So to earn trust, we look for people who listen well, who speak candidly, and treat others respectfully. They follow through on their commitments. To be right a lot, we look for those who have strong judgment and good instincts, and they seek out diverse perspectives, and they intentionally look for views that are contrary to their own beliefs. We look for people who can respectfully challenge a decision if they disagree. We like people who have conviction and who are tenacious. That said, though, once a decision is made, good leaders commit wholly to it. I'll tell you, if you tend towards public compliance and private defiance, you'll soon be found out here. So when you combine those traits across teams, you have the ability to collaborate well, to listen to alternative points of view, and to assess new information in order to make high judgment decisions. So that process of discernment is, for me, the key to the future. We can't fully envision where technology will take society. But if we have people who can assess information and options well, if they can apply their thinking with a sense of integrity and ethics, we can become a society that can benefit from innovation, not be drowned by it. I should say that we find some of our best leaders, those who emerge quickly to take on larger roles, come from colleges and universities where they developed their skills to apply critical thinking and make trade-off decisions. People with a background in humanities, where they've learned to apply critical analysis to a text or a philosophy or a political perspective, can be hugely effective in technology settings. Let me offer you 3 suggestions on how I think we could strengthen those abilities in students for the future. The first is, I'd say, placing students in settings that require them to assess information and make decisions, and then allow them to observe the downstream consequences of those decisions, might become a core part in helping prepare for the future of work. The second, the blending of disciplines, where students experience a different way to critically assess ideas and information, may also broaden their ability to be ready for the future. A degree in engineering and ethics, or physics and philosophy, might sound odd today, but could prepare students for the economies and opportunities and dilemmas of the future. And thirdly, I'd say the idea that once you throw off that cap and gown, you've completed your education, that's now anachronistic. We need graduates to believe that they will spend their entire careers learning and being curious about new ideas, new approaches, new decisions. As the minister says, that concept of lifelong learning. In the US, universities apply great effort in building and maintaining a lifelong relationship with their alumni. Now, cynically, you could say that this is so they can cultivate them as donors, but it also means that they're a source of referrals for new applications for the university, and they continue to develop and deepen the relationship as they return for additional qualifications or just-in-time training throughout their life. So our universities may want to shift their thinking to building a 40-year relationship, not a 4-year one. By encouraging alumni to come back to learn new skills, new ways to think about hard problems, that university stays relevant in people's professional and personal lives. So for me, I see universities as reservoirs of experimentation, insights, and innovation that people will want to dip back into for their entire life. So before I finish, I'll make one more additional observation. As I mentioned at the start, I've spent much of my professional career in the US. So returning home, I'm really struck by the unique attributes of Ireland that makes me excited and optimistic about the challenges we're facing. We're small enough that you can build relationships across many walks of life. It's a given here that our future is in being an open, technologically sophisticated, and globally engaged economy. The rest of the world is inclined to us because of our history, our arts, and today because of our abilities to work effectively in global settings. In another culture, my peers who lead the other tech companies would be wary rivals. In Ireland, we're in constant dialogue about how we can help the country succeed even further. Many of us engage with government and the universities in settings like today to further that discussion. So as a country, if we can harness that easy connectedness to collaboratively prepare our students for the future, I think my optimism will be justified. So I leave you with these 3 thoughts in summary. The first is the growth of data has already changed our economy and society, and that pace of change will increase. The second is we need our college graduates, our leaders of the future, to be adept in making high judgment decisions on how we use all that information to innovate and improve our lives. And finally, Ireland has a comparable advantage, given its size and its style, if we, government, the third level sector, business, and wider society work together to develop plans that help prepare us all for the future. So thank you.
Thanks indeed, Mike, for that very stimulating address indeed. And as a history graduate myself 170 years ago, I'm delighted to hear that there is a future for people with a humanities background in this technological world we're advancing into in the 21st century. Now, I'd like to invite I'm going to introduce our panelists now, but before that, to remind them to switch back on their video and audio links so they can join us. Firstly, Professor Kirsten May took up her appointment as interim president of the University of Limerick in September 2020, last month. Congratulations again, Kirsten. With a background in the visual arts and German language and literature, Kirsten has spent the past 25 years initiating and implementing pioneering academic and research initiatives and cultural projects in higher education. Claire McGee is Head of Education and Innovation Policy at IBEC. Claire works with industry, government and stakeholders in education to increase investment and agility in Ireland's education and innovation systems, and to enhance our talent pipeline and boost our capacity for innovation. And Kevin McStravick is a graduate of Ulster University and served 3 times at Ulster University Students' Union. He's now Vice President of Academic Affairs at the Union of Students in Ireland and is also Vice President of USI. Welcome all. Now, I'm not sure if the Minister has left us. I think he may. Oh, no, he's there. I'm sorry.
I'll be here for the next 10 minutes or so. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, well, I might just put a question to you first, Simon. I heard you on News Talk this morning. I know not everybody listening in this morning was listening to you at 6:30, but it was a very, just like your presentation today, it was a very meaty interview you did. And I think maybe we could possibly park the whole issue of funding. I see my old friend Gary McGann bringing it up in a question to us as well. That funding, I think, is accepted by all stakeholders as absolutely critical, and you've acknowledged that yourself. And you also acknowledged this morning and elsewhere that you will be making a decision on that once the European Commission comes back with its report early 2021. Could I just ask you firstly, though, what way you're leaning towards? It sounded to me this morning that you're leaning towards more exchequer involvement and perhaps more from business on a targeted approach.
Yeah, so not getting ahead of myself here, but I mean, the approach I take to this is we have made incredible progress as a country when it comes to education. So we live in a country now where you have free preschool education for 2 years, where we have free primary and secondary education, and where we have more and more people going to university than ever before. I don't like the idea. It sticks in my craw that students would leave college heavily indebted. I don't think the student loan model works. That's the approach I bring to this. So I think particularly at undergraduate level, the idea that the Exchequer provides funding and the business community provides funding, as they already do in fairness, and they already provide, as I'm sure Claire from IBEC will remind us, quite a significant amount of funding. But from my conversation with business leaders, I think they're quite pragmatic about this because they understand the battle for talent is so key to their future success and the success of our economy. So that's a brief insight into where my head is at. We have asked, I mean, the last Oireachtas, all parties decided to ask for an economic evaluation of Casells. We're running out of road on reports now, to be quite honest. This is the last report, and it's due back. It's due back from the the European Commission's input in early 2021.
Thanks, Minister. And I know you acknowledged this morning as well that parties of every colour have shirked this decision in the past, and that you're determined to take it. I might come to you, Claire, just on that. I mean, we know employers contribute 1%, almost 1% of payroll now to the National Training Fund, which is obviously a big contribution. But in terms of further education, which is obviously going to be a huge element, lifelong learning as we advance to the 21st century, what do you think businesses here, particularly larger businesses, I suppose, who are more resourceful, what do you think they can do more to actually give people the time, their employees the time, and that they're not penalised financially in actually doing some of those shorter module courses or intermediate courses that would get us up to speed with the likes of the Scandinavians, where there's a much higher percentage of people in the workforce engaged in further learning all the time?
Yeah, great question, Vincent. I think it's hugely important. I think it was very clearly articulated there by Mike, you know, the challenge that we tend to maybe front load our education in Ireland. We are very much have a high kind of graduation rate, let's say, but then as that tapers off, and if you particularly think of individuals who may be mid-career, who may be at a point where they're looking to actually change careers or move into different industries, but they're absolutely challenged in terms of their commitments already to work and also family commitments. So there's very little time then for them to maybe take on, you know, a 9 credit or a 90 credit master's program at that stage. So how do we make sure that the education system is responding as well as it possibly can and breaking down, I suppose, some of the best programs that it has and making them into these kind of bite-size or micro, as you mentioned earlier, this micro credentialing of opportunity? Because the challenge here is that how do we actually get more people in Ireland to engage in that lifelong learning process? Skills that you develop at, you know, at your, you know, primary degree or, you know, as you enter into the workforce are not going to see you through until you retire at 70 years of age. And if we just think back over the last 10 years, all of those new technologies and innovation, cloud computing was mentioned by Mike, with new technologies, with synthetic biology, it's just the pace of this disruption is just immense. And I think now the opportunity, and it's timely, that we try and encourage as many businesses as many employees and as many individuals to actually participate in it. So I like that concept that Mike spoke about, this boomerang of graduate or this student, and how can actually the education system keep its graduates as connected as it possibly can, so that you can return and we make things maybe less unit, I suppose, like a pipeline, which is very kind of linear. Actually, we need to make things much more renewable and a little bit more sustainable. So business, I think, is a huge, there's a huge gain for here at business as well. We just launched yesterday at our HR summit some statistics around some of the challenges that are facing business at the moment. Significant investments are being made by business now in technology, but that needs to be matched then by training in that technology, so that we can now develop this new remote working style, and that we now have greater degrees of employee engagement. But we can't do that training unless it's accessible, unless it's easy to do it. And we kind of have a new concept or a new kind of paradigm for training or for learning into the future. So now is the time to be able to do that.
Okay. Minister, you might let me know when you have to go, because I have at least one more question to put to you before you do, and hopefully you can stay as long as possible. Kirsten, if I could come to you, and congratulations again. I know you've taken up your leadership role very recently in Limerick. My understanding is that the University of Limerick, regardless of what discipline people, students are following, have work placements as part of their undergraduate course. Do you think that is a very strong way forward, that it gives students an early feel for the workplace and whether they're on the right path or not?
Thank you very much, Vincent. The University of Limerick had cooperative education in its mission right from the start of its development. So we're looking back to 50 years of an integrated program of work-based learning for all undergraduate students. And that remains very important. But I do think that as the occupational landscape and patterns of employment change, that we have to create a diversity of opportunities for students to engage with the workplace, so to speak, by supporting entrepreneurial activities, by supporting engaging with their communities in co-creation of learning there. So I think, and we have to do that at all levels. And in fact, the government aim is that work-based learning will be integrated in all our programs going forward. So I think it is very important to keep learning relevant and to shape those soft skills that Mike Beary talked about earlier. So I would strongly argue that work-based learning in its very diverse shapes and forms, engagement with industry and businesses, but also with communities and the third sector, is crucial for progressing our education programs.
Thanks indeed, Kirsten. Kevin, if I could come to you, I know you're in Derry, you're from Derry, you went to college in Belfast, but you have an All-Ireland perspective, obviously, in the Union of Students of Ireland. Do you think that students, and most students now enter our further education system 18 or 19 years of age, do you think students have a sufficient input themselves into the types of courses that they need for the life skills and the specialist skills and the judgment skills that Mike talked about as they enter the workforce 4 or 5 years later? Have you sufficient input in that, or are students just so happy to get out of school that they just move on?
Yeah, thanks, Vincent. Yeah, I think in terms of input from students in regards to the courses they study, definitely there have been strides forward in recent years in terms of staff and students working in partnership to develop the curriculum, to co-design what those courses look like. But there's always room for improvement. There's always room for that to be enhanced. Skills development, as you've previously alluded to, is something that students say has been very important. When the National Forum for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning went out last year and spoke to students in terms of student success, around 37% of students came back and talked about skills development being one of the key pinnacles of student success for them. So it is definitely something that students see as a priority. I think it's also important, in referring to what both Mike and Claire have referred to as well, in terms of some of those soft skills, they're sometimes maybe disparagingly referred to, the things like communication, like teamwork, like critical thinking. It's important to recognise that, yes, those skills are developed in the classroom, but they're also developed outside the classroom too. They're developed in volunteering, they're developed in being a class rep. They're being developed in clubs and societies. And there is some great practice across the higher education sector. I know there's practice in DCU and DKIT, for example, in terms of accreditation for those additional roles the students play. But I think there's a role for a conversation across the sector and how we can acknowledge and how we can actually recognize the skills that students develop outside the classroom, as well as those critical skills that they develop in the classroom too, in their learning.
On that point, Mike, coming back to you, I was intrigued by your three suggestions at the end. One in particular, where people who are learning, who are studying, I suppose, let's say younger people in particular, but lifelong studies, where people can be put in an environment, a workplace environment, where they see the consequences of their decisions without that being calamitous, so to speak. Forgive my ignorance, but is AWS doing this already, or would you be happy to take students in at undergraduate level or perhaps later to put them into those kind of real life situations that they can make those kinds of decisions without desperate consequences, that they learn from them?
Well, to be honest with you, Vincent, yes, we do it already. I don't think we do it to the extent we could here in Ireland. One of the things we have done as an organization globally is we've redoubled our focus on what we call early career talent. So we're very much focused on bringing people in straight from undergrad and helping them build their skill set and their career within the organization. Said differently, we don't think our competitors are minting new Amazonians for us every day. We think we need to do that for ourselves. And so the partnership with colleges around the world is becoming a huge part in how we think about growing our talent. The other piece is that concept of bringing in and seeing what happens when you make a decision. We're an organization that embraces failure. And I'll give you one real fast example. You may remember 4 or 5 years ago, we launched the Fire Phone, which was the Amazon's answer to the iPhone. It was really technologically sophisticated, priced like an iPhone, had all kinds of cameras and doodads in it, but nobody bought it. Right? It was a complete dud. And but what happens in our culture is we say, what did we learn from that? And what does it mean for the future? So nobody got fired because of the Fire Phone. And actually what came out of that is that the complex microphones that were put into that phone and that natural language processing that was first launched there turned into Alexa. And so suddenly that's where echoes come from and all that kind of stuff. So we like people who are willing to take a risk, fail, and learn from that. So yes, we would be game to create those kind of experiences for people.
Minister, I'm conscious of your time there. I know you're getting a whisper in your ear there. Two quick questions, if I could. One from one of our participants. Are you conscious of trying to do something in a very crowded agenda? I know I've tried to do something about the sometimes very precarious tenure of our junior academic and higher education staff, and giving them some sort of career path and security is vital towards a sustainable and nimble sector. And secondly, if I was to ask you, if you had one priority for the university sector in particular during your tenure, what would it be?
I thought I did well to put it into 4 pillars, but I think to work more seamlessly with further education and training is the answer to the second question. I think we have to look at the diversity of pathways and the moving from one pathway to the other. Do you know we only have about 84 people with intellectual disabilities in higher education in Ireland? We have 55,000 of them in daycare services. I mean, I was the health minister and we were having conversations day in, day out about trying to find 18 and 19-year-old people daycare places in our health service instead of having conversations with them about what they wish to do. So when I talk about our institutions being a beacon of inclusion, that's the sort of stuff that I mean. In relation to the precarious employment, I am concerned about this. I'm trying to wrap my arms around it at the moment. I've met a number of researchers and postgrad students already, and I have asked for a paper on it, but I think there's legitimate issues that do need to be rectified, and I am aware of them. Okay,
thank you, Minister. And we know you may have to go, and if you need to go in a hurry, thanks indeed for participating today.
Thank you very much to everybody for having me. I very much appreciate it.
Appreciate that. Claire, we're talking largely about the third level sector here, but is there a feeling, and I might get Kevin's participation in this as well, that our second level system, and perhaps to a degree our third level system then, isn't doing enough to get students to think for themselves, to question the information they get, that our system is certainly at second level is kind of based on a rote system to get points, to channel people, and it's not sufficiently challenging people to think for themselves, to question, to develop the kind of judgment skills that Mike and all his colleagues in the multinational sector and in business generally require.
I really liked how Mike talked about these high judgment skills, because these are actually life skills. I mean, we're all going to be in high pressured environments where we have to make snap decisions like that. And they're not isolated just to the large multinationals. They're in SME businesses where you don't actually have the time or the resources to make indecision or lengthy decisions. So this concept of high judgment is incredibly important. So we in IBEC have been working on this for a significant amount of time. But 5 years ago, we launched a series of policy recommendations around how do you build that entrepreneurial mindset. So back to Mike's point about this risk and that appetite for risk. And we had recommendations right through the primary system to the second level system and indeed beyond that. And if we look at primary school today, it's very collaborative, it's very engaging. I sent my 2 children off there this morning, all excited and ready to kind of for their Halloween midterm. And they really do look forward to school. And that's been a transformation in Ireland over the last 5 or 10, 15 years. Then you go into second level and you're back into this individual approach, and it's very competitive. And I'm hoping that the reform of senior cycle that's currently underway will really try and kind of disrupt that a little bit. We've seen some disruption again within further education, within higher education, and really welcome some of those recent announcements through the Human Capital Initiative that brings greater degree of collaboration together. But I think actually what we need to do is maybe challenge the university system to put a little bit of pressure back onto senior cycle and to really kind of challenge second level around that, because it's back to my same point. The world is not just around, you know, our education for the first 25 years of our lives. It's going to be lifelong, life-wide, and I don't think the system is currently geared to be able to do that. So looking forward to seeing change on that very soon.
I see you nodding pretty strongly there, Kirsten.
Indeed.
You agree with that perhaps the third level should put pressure back through the system on second level?
I totally agree. If we want to educate lifelong learners, if we want to move towards self-determined learning, i.e. the know-how of acquiring skills and knowledge, that cannot just start at tertiary level. The seeds have to be sown at primary and secondary school level. And really, Mike talked earlier about judgment, but also about metacognition. You know, if you remain within your discipline in primary and secondary education, you know, then it will be very difficult to acquire metacognition, translating between different areas of knowing and doing at tertiary level. So really, we have to start much earlier to think about challenge-driven learning that looks at complex problems and brings in the skills and the knowledge perspectives from different disciplines.
I see we're coming up to 2 o'clock, but I know most of you are still with us, which is great, and which is also reflecting the stimulating debate we're having here. So perhaps just a couple of more questions to bring in everybody, and I'll finish with you, Mike. So thank you for your patience. But Kirsten, if I could come to you again, I know you've worked in the German system and you've worked in the British system. Are there programs, are there processes that we could learn from here in terms of how students generally are more prepared to leave our systems, at least temporarily, with those judgment skills than we have in our own system here?
I do think there are international examples where universities and other education institutions have switched to challenge-driven learning more wholesomely than we currently do in Ireland, in order to support students to embrace complexity, navigate ambiguity, in addition to disciplinary grounding, support skills such as problem solving, critical thinking and reflection, and above all, inquisitiveness and imagination as a core ingredients of creativity. And in collaborating with industries, businesses, and other stakeholders, create situations that support risk-taking, team working, but also I think focuses on these issues of cultural translation between the different areas of knowledge as a basis for understanding. So I do think we can learn from that, and particularly with the notion of students as co-creators of their learning experience, who produce the tools and the resources for learning, you know, enhance peer learning. I think there are opportunities for us to develop further in the future.
I see you nodding to that, Kevin, that whole facilitation of greater collaboration by students in their learning scenario, because collaboration is the way forward now in the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd echo Kirsten's comments about the key role that students have to play in co-creation with staff. I think that is absolutely vital to the success of higher education and vital to the success of students in developing new skills. And maybe just to briefly say as well, I think there's also a need to ensure the balance of the skills agenda within higher education with access. And I recognise the comments that the Minister made earlier in terms of that, and in terms of that sort of beacon of inclusion. I think it's also important that we look not just at the how we're getting students into higher education, but how they're getting on in higher education. And there's a lot of incredible work being carried out by students' unions, by access offices and other support services in supporting students through that. But it's also important that they can access the education in the classroom. So I think championing the principles of universal design for learning are quite important. I think ensuring that the entirety of the student body has a voice and has a role to play in that co-creation piece is really important. And I suppose lastly, I recognise the enhanced role that equality, diversity and inclusion plays in higher education, and I think that's to be welcomed. But I think if we're really committed to access being at the heart of what higher education does, then EDI needs to be more than a buzzword, that needs to sit right at the heart of the agenda for higher education.
Claire, that question that Mike referenced there, and that disastrous phone fire, that whole question of you know, helping people to learn that failure is not a disaster, that failure is part of the life process, and that, you know, we'll never innovate, we'll never start our own businesses, we'll never join with other small groups to get into enterprise if failure is seen as punitive. Do we need to foster that whole idea of try and try again in our third level system?
Yeah, as Beckett said, fail and fail better. But I think, look, I love actually to hear those examples of stories when things don't go right. And, you know, obviously it's a costly exercise for business, but there are examples of that across, you know, the corporate world, where things didn't go right, but actually it developed something else. And I would imagine in the development of the vaccine now for COVID, it seems to be 10 steps forward and then 20 back, and then finally we'll have a breakthrough. And I think that's the whole concept of learning and relearning and learning again. But the concept of failure, the way I think that our system is currently geared up, we don't encourage that concept of failure. There's, you know, our second level system is geared towards a high stakes terminal exam driven by high points. We don't talk enough about the need for career guidance, or how can we actually have different pathways and diversities to either the world of work or to higher level qualifications. And I think that's why we need to see a little bit more of this engagement between enterprise, between the education system, between the government, and between individuals themselves, because ultimately, by working together, we will all the outcome will be much better. By kind of just leaving it to one or two stakeholders within that system, it's just not going to work as well. So this concept of failure is a really interesting one, but maybe what we need to do is make sure that maybe when the failure isn't as great. So the concept is good, but we need to have the support systems that when things don't work out, there's a safety net to catch you and push you back on the path that you want to be. At the moment, we don't have that safety net. We don't have the career guidance system that we currently need. We don't have the labour market intelligence system that we need. Business don't have the resources to dip in and dip out as sufficiently as they need to be able to do it. And therefore then the risk is too great. So what we need now is the safety net to be able to do it. And hopefully we can come back this time next year, finish this conversation, and the Minister will have put to bed some of those bigger questions that we need solved to be able to make sure that Ireland and its education system is really as world class as we want it to be.
And career guidance, I think at third level, because we all know how many students fall through the net after their first year because they've taken the wrong course or it hasn't been what they. So they need to be re-guided so that that resource and their personal disappointment is got over. Mike, we will finish with you, and thanks for your patience there. And it was a wonderful address from you and lots of thoughts there. I suppose I just want to ask you one, apart from the alumni system in the United States, you spent a lot of your life there. Are there other elements of the broad United States, and we know how expensive it is, but the broad United States third level education system that you would like to see incorporated here to some degree? And secondly, and finally, just after your 4 years back here now, and given the growing enterprise you lead here, what would you like to see in terms of greater collaboration between business, industry, and government? Industry, academic, the third level sector, and government.
Yeah, Vincent. So just very briefly on the kind of US observation. One of the things that if you think about, and I think Claire and Kirsten both kind of described it well in terms of the primary, secondary, third level in Ireland, we've high quality all along the way, and but then we get people to specialize more and more as they go along when they get into university. You could argue that US primary and secondary education, certainly in the public sphere, isn't as robust and highly regarded as it is here. But everybody catches up quickly when they get to third level, because third level is such well-funded, well-crafted space in the US economy. Part of that, though, I will observe is you join a university, you don't pick a course. And so you get to explore. You don't declare a major, to use the American term, for maybe a year or two when you're there. So you get to test yourself as you grow and say, actually, I thought I was going to be really interested in science, but I actually love journalism, or I love the law, or something like that. And you get to test that for a couple of years at the university level before you kind of focus. So there's something there about continuing to allow people to explore who they are and what their passions are, because it's really hard if you're 17 to say, this is what I want to be for the rest of my life. So that's one. And then on your second part, the piece I'm really excited about today is I suspect people thought I would come and say, let's produce more software engineers. And the fact that I really wanted to focus on collaboration, innovation, judgment, and that kind of resonates, tells me that I'm pushing an open door here across the system, both in terms of the minister's comments and what we're hearing from the leaders in third level already. So to Claire's point, I think we're at the starting point of something really exciting for Ireland, and that sense that we're small enough and intimate enough that we can talk to each other and collaborate and get the various different stakeholders aligned to that vision, I think makes it really possible. So I remain excited, and I'm delighted to be part of the conversation.
Okay, well, on that optimistic and bullish note, we will leave it there. I'd like to thank our three panelists, Kirsten May, Kevin McStravick, and Claire McGee, for joining us and adding so much to that debate today. I'd like to thank in particular Mike Beary, our guest speaker today, and of course the Minister, who understandably had to leave us, but I think who left us with a lot of hope for the future, and the fact that he certainly is going to be pulling his sleeves up and instigating the changes we need to bring the third level sector closer to the overall needs of the economy. Now, the next IUA Future of Ireland event is on Thursday, November 26th, about a month away, to discuss the theme of the inclusive university, a very important topic, and it'll also mark International Access to Higher Education Day. So I hope you can join us for that. And thank you, the participants out there, whom we didn't see, for staying with us today, and for so many of you joining us on this very important debate. Have an enjoyable bank holiday weekend. I'm told it's a bank holiday weekend in the strange new world we live in. Thanks indeed.